Welcome back, dear viewers. You're still watching Nile Cruise from inside Nemek International Museum of Egyptian Civilization in Al Fustat, Cairo, and we are honored now to have with us the Executive Vice President of Nemek for Archaeological Affairs, Dr. Maysara Abdallah, who is also an Egyptologist. And by the way, Dr. Maysara has had a lot of contributions to many projects and works that played an important role in the progress of work in antiquities here in Egypt at the Ministry of Tourism and Antiquities. He has participated in many committees and tasks related to Egyptian antiquities, and he worked as a member of the Supreme Committee for the museum display scenario and selecting artifacts for major museum projects in Egypt. Dr. Abdallah, thank you very much for hosting us.
You're welcome.
And it's an honor to be with you, sir.
Thank you.
Please tell us, I know it's a very broad question, a very big question, but we want to lay the floor to someone as knowledgeable as you in this field. So, the Egyptian civilization, the secrets of the state. If you want to tell the world how, in the simplest way, how did this civilization begin? What would you say?
In fact, the Egyptian civilization is considered one of the earliest civilizations in the world. But this civilization has special features. For example, the ancient Egyptians were their civilization was the only civilization in the world that the Egyptians spoke by one language only, the ancient Egyptian language, from prehistoric era until the Christian era, more than at least 100,000 years ago. If we say now Egypt is 7,000 years of civilization, this is not correct. In fact,
did I hear you correctly?
Yes.
You said 100,000?
Yes.
Okay, so explain this to us, please.
I want to say that the earliest features of sedentism of the societies on the Nile Valley in Egypt began at least from 120,000 years ago. By the way, the earliest known artifacts discovered here in Egypt 3,200,000 years ago. So from this early age, the Egyptians used to speak.
You said 3 billion.
3 billion. Yes, 3 billion years ago. And we are displaying here in the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization the earliest known artifacts made by the Egyptians on the Egyptian land. And these artifacts are considered a treasure in our museum here. From the earliest stages of the Egyptian civilizations, the Egyptians spoke by one language only, the ancient Egyptian language, and believed in one religion, the ancient Egyptian religion, which depended mainly on the nature of Egypt, the sun, the river Nile, and the wind, and they made a god for each feature of the life. So, the Egyptian civilization was famous for by the unity between its people on the land of Egypt. And this what made the Egyptian civilization very progress and very unique among the other civilizations of the world.
Something that exists until today.
Yes, of
the
course.
Unity of Egyptians, of course. So, according to your studies, how did the map of Egypt look like 90 million years ago, and then 18 million years ago after getting into the Fayoum desert?
In fact, the map of Egypt changed dramatically through ages. If we speak about 90 or 80 million years ago, the Egyptian land or the Egyptian soil at this remote time was not like ours now. For example, the Egyptian land was covered by water, by salty water from the Mediterranean Sea. Its shores reached Middle Egypt, for example, and dinosaurs lived over the Egyptian land from 100 million years ago to about 3 million years ago, maybe more, 5 or 7 million years ago. But there were no any population
right.
at that
no mankind. We're talking about
completely.
The dinosaur era.
Yes, but the Egyptian land was covered by flora,
Salty
and,
water,
flora and the fauna, a lot of woods, and a huge quantity of rainfalls, which made the Egyptian land a fertile land, a very fertile land, a very humid land. But the changing started dramatically from about 1 billion years ago. At that time, the drought began to appear, so dinosaurs disappeared in Egypt about 7 billion years ago, and the humankind started to begin again, or to be seen at that time from about 3 billion years ago. At that time, there was no river Nile. We had a small open in the Egyptian land, but without water. The river Nile was not exist yet, and the woods covered the eastern and western desert of Egypt. So the humankind and the people lived on these woods, and the earliest features of the societies started to appear at that remote time. But by years, the drought of the woods started from northern Egypt to the south, and so the woods and the Egyptian woods started to become desert, and we have now the eastern and western desert,
right,
which drove the population to settle on the shores of the river Nile.
Right. So when did the river Nile actually appear, and how did it change life, of course, in Egypt and across the world, I guess?
The river Nile, as addict in the Egyptian land, started from 30 billion years ago, but without water. But the water became annually in the land of Egypt from about 40,000 years ago. And that was the reason why the Egyptians settled on the banks of the river Nile, and this is what made the Egyptian civilization to begin.
Again, you said 40,000 years ago?
40,000 years ago.
So you believe that there was life in Egypt, a continuous life for mankind as we know it, some 40,000 years ago, maybe more.
Yes, because we have here in our museum, here is the National Museum of Egyptian Civilization. For example, we have the earliest known human remain in Egypt. It's called the Taramsa skeleton. And Taramsa skeleton was discovered in a village called Taramsa near the temple of Dendera in Upper Egypt. And it belongs to a small child who lived here in Egypt from about 55,000 years ago. And his family used to make artifacts, stone artifacts. And this child, unfortunately, suffered from a severe injury in his head, which made him died, and his family buried his body in the land, and it was discovered in 1988, and this is considered the oldest human remains known in Egypt until now.
Is it the oldest in the world as well?
No, it's not the oldest,
okay,
but in Egypt it is the oldest one.
Okay, but we don't know of how life exactly was, except for when history began to be written, right?
Yes, of course.
And this is why we say prehistoric times or historic times. So talk to us about the historic times now, Dr. Maysara Abdallah, if you will, and specifically about the first state that the world has ever known, the Egyptian state.
In fact, ancient Egyptians invented writing. And when they invented writing, the earliest features of writing began at least more than 4,000 BC. At least 4,000 BC. When the Egyptians borrowed signs from nature and used it as vowels, as phonetic values, and started to write with it. At that time, the Egyptians were able to write. At this time, the Egyptians decided to make a country for themselves. In fact, at this time, Egypt was divided into small kingdoms, if we can say, about 7 kingdoms in the prehistory of Egypt. And when these kingdoms were united together, it was at about 3200 BC when the unified state began.
Mina.
Yes, and at this time, Egypt became a country. We have the earliest known political regime in the world. And this regime, when was founded in Egypt, the Egyptians divided this history into dynasties. And they divided their history into 30 dynasties who ruled Egypt from 3000 BC until the Greco-Roman occupation in 30 BC.
Right. What is the most reliable story, Dr. Maysara Abdallah, behind naming Egypt by this name?
Yeah.
And what is the significance of this name? And allow me also to ask not only about Egypt, but about Misr or Masr as well.
Yes. In fact, Egyptians had many names for their land. They called Egypt with more than 150 different names. But the most common between them was Kemet. In Coptic, Keme. Keme or Kemet refers to the Egyptian land, and this is the word used by Egyptians to refer to their country. Historians like Herodotus and Bellini and others translated this word as the black land or the fertile land. But in fact, the word Kemet in ancient Egyptian language means the complete land.
Complete?
Yes,
okay.
Because they believe...
It has everything.
Yes, it has everything. Ancient Egyptians defined their country as the complete land which has everything. But the Egyptians had another names. For example, another name called Egypt. The word Egypt, which is now...
It's very close to what the Coptic
yes,
word
Egyptos.
Yeah.
The word Egypt or Egyptos came from ancient Egyptian word Egypt. Egypt in ancient Egyptian language means the inundation or the flood of the Nile. And this a weird feature of the Nile, when the Greeks saw this dramatic flood every year, they called the Egyptian land the land of the flood.
Right.
And they call it Egyptos. And this is from where the word Egypt derived from.
And of course, according to some pronunciations,
yes.
Egyptos.
Egyptos, yes, in Greeks. Yes. And the other word, Misr, Misr is an ancient Egyptian word also. It derived from the ancient Egyptian word Majr. Majr means the protected land, the fortified land. Because the Egyptian borders in Egypt, especially in the Middle Kingdom about 2000 BC, was famous for by walls to separate the Egyptian land from other frontiers. So these walls were known as Majr. Majr means the fortification or the protected land. And from where this word still used until today. Masr or Majr means the fortified.
Beautiful, beautiful. Dr. Maysara Abdallah, Nemek is located here in Fustat. Fustat was the first, of course, Islamic capital for Egypt. Tell us about the beauty of Al-Fustat, the significance of having Nemek here, the great work that has been done and the surroundings, the great infrastructure that we're now seeing around Nemek and the development of the area of Fustat. Talk to us about all of this.
In fact, the area of Al-Fustat is famous by the city of Al-Fustat, which was built by Amr ibn al-As when he opened Egypt in the beginning of the Islamic era. But in fact, the site has a very, very ancient history before. For example, this site was the beginning of the 14th Dome of Lower Egypt in ancient Egypt. A site was very, very sacred for the god Osiris. In ancient Egypt, we had a great temple for the god Osiris, which was around this area. Unfortunately, we don't know its location until now, but some blocks from this temple were discovered. We have another thing very important. the lake of Ain al-Sira. The lake of Ain al-Sira was known in ancient Egypt as Ghiraha. Ghiraha means the battlefield, because the ancient Egyptians believed that the last battlefield between god Horus and Thes took place at this place, on this lake. And for this reason, the site became the last place for the fight between Horus and Thes. And for this reason, the site was very sacred for the god Osiris, for his resurrection. And also it was the beginning of the Nile flood in the delta. So the Egyptians built a small Nilometer near the site here at El-Manial, now at the island of El-Manial, near the palace of El-Manasterli.
Yes.
And also they built a small harbor. This harbor in the Greek Roman became the largest harbor over the river Nile. And so in Greek Roman period, this place became the settlement of the Roman garrison in the Roman period. And this is why Amr ibn al-As, when he came to Egypt and occupied the area here, he built his capital for Egypt as this place when he captured the Roman garrison.
Right.
When the UNESCO and the Egyptian authorities decided to build the Museum of Al-Hadara, or the National Museum, as this site, they chose this place for this reason. And so the design of the museum and the aim of this museum changed the whole area dramatically. The lake, for example, the lake of El Fustat was improved and developed very greatly. The suburb and the area around the museum became very, very beautiful houses with modern houses for the people, and even the museum itself reflected such development which we can see in the site.
Indeed. Dr. Maysara, Namek holds a great variety of cultural, educational, and training activities as well. Can you talk to us about some of them?
In fact, our slogan that we are not just a museum. The National Museum of Egyptian Civilization is not just a museum, because we have display galleries in the museum here, but we have many other activities. For example, we have a large theater of 500 seats, and we hold monthly cultural events, musical events, opera events. We have plays to take place here. Also, we have a conference gallery in the museum here for conferences. Also, we have a school for children to give the children, or to make the children keen to their civilization and to know their civilization, and they come to the museum 3 times per week to have these workshops in such a school. We have also workshops for archaeologists of the museum and also of the ministry, and we have also labs, scientific labs for restoration and also for scientific analysis. Many events take place here in the museum just to say we are not just only a museum.
Right. You hosted the 2021 World Men's Handball Championship draw.
Yes.
And a lot of events, like you said, Dr. Maysara, that proves that this is not just a museum. I had a question. GEM, of course, which is already being described, even before its official inauguration, as the greatest or the biggest cultural city in the world.
Yes.
I'm sure there is a lot of cooperation and integration between you here at Namek and GEM. Could you talk to us about that?
In fact, we have a large cooperation and integration between GEM and the Namek, but in fact we are completely different than GEM. The GEM is a museum dedicated to ancient Egyptian civilization.
Only,
yes. From prehistoric era until early Roman era.
Yes.
But here in the Namek, we have a small capsule of Egypt from prehistoric era until contemporary time. So we give the visitor a small visit through the history and civilization of Egypt from pre-dynastic period and prehistory until our modern day. So this is the difference between us.
Yes, and finally, Dr. Maysara, what is the thing that you like most about NEMIC, which you are the vice president of? I mean, of course, it was a great day back in April in 2021 when the mummies, the royal mummies came here, and this great place was inaugurated. Tell the viewers, what do you personally like most about this great museum?
What I like mostly here in the museum to see the Egyptian visitors. By the way, we are the museum #1 all over Egypt from the number of the Egyptian visitors, because from the royal parade of the royal mummies from the Egyptian museum to our museum here in the NEMIC, this parade and this huge celebration, which
the president himself
oversaw
yes.
here, made the Egyptians keen to their civilization, and they started to come here. And every day we have at least 3,000 to 4,000 visitors. At least half of them are Egyptians, and this is the greatest achievement that we have made.
Indeed, the sense of belonging will always be there for Egyptians who love their country, who love their heritage. Thank you very much, Dr. Maysara Abdallah, the Executive Vice President of NEMIC for Archaeological Affairs, of course, a renowned Egyptologist.
Thank
you for having us.
Thank you.
And thank you for being with us.
Thank you, and welcome in our museum.
Thank you, Dr. Maysara. Dear viewers, please stay with us. Nile Cruise will be back from the heart of NEMIC in the great Al Fustat.